I'll say good evening to everyone. And today, for class 2 of week 4, we'll talk about the client-practitioner relationship. And the reading was chapter 4 on the role and style of the OD practitioner. So there was a psychological contract violation, and it was by me, because there's a day where you cannot be in class and it's canceled. The earlier it's communicated, the better. And I agreed to communicate if I was going to be canceling class. But what I didn't think I would do, I didn't consider that maybe the administration would cancel all classes. And I figured if they did that, then they would tell you. So, but I've heard that you actually didn't hear anything. Nothing. I think what you're supposed to do, like I think what the rules are, is that in case of any storm stuff, you watch the St. Mary's website and everything is posted there. So I knew that because, well, my friends told me, but it was all posted on the website. So I interpreted that as if I cancel class, then I will let you know as soon as possible. But I didn't consider the university might. And so I apologize because 3 people showed up. And going forward, I will let you all know when class is canceled, regardless of who canceled it. And I am saying this because I think it shows how those informal psychological contracts are ambiguous and people interpret them in different ways, even when they're all being reasonable and acting in good faith. I just taped the lecture and I posted that for you, so you can find the link to that on Brightspace. I have now processed a number of accommodation requests from the Fred Smithers Center. Let me know if you have accessibility needs that are not related to a medical condition. Disabilities are not just medical phenomena. According to the social model of disability, it's context and power that define whether something's a disability. And additionally, I'd say that accessibility is more than disability. So if that's an issue for you, please let me know. I have released the feedback for quiz 1. So you should be able to go and check what you got wrong and what the right answer was. You can do that under the submission view in Brightspace. So let me know if anything comes up. Please check for misspellings or use of synonyms on the auto-graded fill-in-the-blank questions. And let me know if there's any issues with the grading. The average was 67 and the median was 63. I'm very happy with that because a satisfactory grade is defined as 60% or over. So as long as people are getting more than 60, I am happy. If you want to get A's, that's on you and it's gravy, but it's not something that I expect. I'm happy if you do. What I don't like is the DFW range. So I don't want to see F's and D's. A couple of people did get lower grades, and what I'll do is see how you do on the next quiz. And if you're still holding that pattern, then I will ask for a meeting so we can address anything to get you on track. All right, on with the topic of the day, which is the relationship between the OD practitioner and the client system. And then this thing just sometimes does not work. So change can happen haphazardly, but change programs, which is what we mean by OD interventions, do not happen accidentally. They are initiated with purpose, and they require leadership. And they're usually initiated out of necessity because there's been some change in the environment and the organization is no longer adapted to the environment. The success of the change program depends on having a well-functioning relationship between the practitioner and the client. And that's what we'll talk about today. Your first problem is, who is the client? And that often seems clear at first, like it's the person that emailed you or who hired you, but this is actually quite complex, and it can get increasingly complex and unclear as more stakeholders start participating. So ideally, it should be the organization as a whole, which is what, again, ideally, the leader represents. In practice, leadership is a special interest group, management is a special interest group, and it may or may not have the best interests of all employees or even the organization itself at heart. So you could be hired by, say, a mid-level manager who is authentic and passionate about change, but who doesn't have buy-in from higher level management. And then that would disempower you because you as the practitioner need the leverage of management behind you. So the person that hires you, your initial contact, is called the client sponsor. But in practice, that person isn't the whole client system. So who's their boss? What about the leader? What other stakeholders are there in the change? Are you just going to be imposing something on people? Do they get to participate in consultations? Do they think there's a problem? So you can see how complex this can be. And is the client or client system ready? So management has to decide that the change is needed. The goals of the change program need to be appropriate. The change program needs to be happening in an organization or in a group where there is a culture that's receptive to change. And we know that off the bat, there's a big misalignment between OD's values as a field and bureaucratic values. You need to have key actors on board, or you can be willing to address and deal with and work through resistance. And the organization members need to be sort of prepared for and oriented to change programs before you just go launch them. And now, what kind of practitioner are you? There are two kinds of practitioner, external and internal. External practitioners are consultants who are contracted to work with the organization for a certain time, and then they leave. Maybe they come back again, maybe they don't. Your textbook says that they are not previously associated with the client system, but I don't buy that at all. External practitioners can have a history with the company. Maybe they're a former employee, maybe they've been service users, or maybe they've just consulted for that organization before and now they're going to do something else. But the point is that they're a consultant or a contractor. They do not have a position that is part of the structural subsystem of the organization. They're not part of the org chart. They're somebody that the organization as a system interacts with. Internal practitioners work for the organization. They have a position that's in the org chart. Maybe they're managers or employees who are trying to lead change, or maybe the organization has its own OD specialists. They're often with HR. There are different advantages and disadvantages for internal and external practitioners. Therefore, it's quite nice to have both an internal and external practitioner working together on a change program, because they can offset each other's weaknesses, and then you can leverage the strengths of both. As you know, organizational culture is invisible at its deeper levels. So an internal practitioner may have difficulty seeing the culture for what it is. Right? They can't see the forest for the trees. So an external practitioner has the advantage of offering an outside perspective, and they may see things in a way that wouldn't occur to people on the inside, and that can make it easier to notice and diagnose cultural problems. Culture can be a big problem. That said, I do not agree that external practitioners have objective positionality. Okay, that is from on top of the real world. They have their own subjective positionality. It's typically a privileged one, and as such is akin to those of managers themselves. And then they're going to have their own personal biases. If the external practitioner was a working class single mother with a disability, she might have a very different perspective. Another place that I disagree with the text is the idea that the external practitioner is independent. There's that myth of independence, not dependent on the organization. The organization is employing you, so there's a power dynamic right there. The book says that ideally the external practitioner doesn't even need the work at all. Well, that's just rich. That said, it is true that an external practitioner is less dependent on the organization than an internal practitioner, because external practitioners typically have a number of clients, and so maybe they can drop this contract if it isn't working out. An internal practitioner is very subject to power and politics in the organization because they rely on management for their pay and their promotion, and just the fact that they want to keep their jobs. And they're also part of that psychosocial subsystem. The disadvantage of the external practitioner is that they lack important knowledge about the organization, and especially that of the psychosocial subsystem. And they might need to take some time getting to know things and people, talking to people to get an idea of the place. The advantages of the internal practitioner is that they are familiar with the culture and the norms. They know the power structure. They know who's who. They know the cliques. They know where the landmines are. They have an awareness of internal issues that an outsider would not. If you're an outsider, that the client sponsor would just tell you this is what the problem is. And then you might just believe that. Once you get talking to people, you might realize, no, I don't think that's quite what the problem is. Okay, so people on the inside know more about the issues, and they know more about the strengths and the weaknesses of the organization. And they also have a personal stake in the success of the organization. Their disadvantages is that if, say, they're managers who want to implement change programs, they may not have specialized skills. So that's one reason to hire an external practitioner. As we said, they may be less aware of the culture. They may unthinkingly or uncritically accept it, and they are much more subject to power and politics. And they may also lack the authority of the power to implement the change they want. OD practitioners have a variety of working styles, and there are 5 main types that differ and depend on the emphasis that they put on effectiveness. That's getting results, and overall employee morale, which is how satisfied organization members are with the process and the results. The stabilizer is the least effective and most harmful kind of OD practitioner. I am standing here today teaching this class, studying OD and EDIA because of what was a frankly traumatic grad school experience with SMU's internal practitioner for conflict resolution, discrimination, and harassment. So the informal processes I was subject to did not help me when I really needed help. Right? It was not as advertised. My faith was mistaken. It was frankly, it was a Kafkaesque nightmare of a kangaroo court that violated the code of professional ethics for appropriate dispute resolution, violated my legal and human rights, and it aided and abetted the higher power perpetrators in retaliating and escaping accountability. It was a pivotal time in my life. The conflict resolution workshop that I had to attend was frankly useless, platitude-laced fundraiser for Peaceful Schools International. And that would have taught me that the skill I needed to survive this place is submission, right? It's active listening to abuse. And no, that was not the case. It was learning to be strong, to stand up for myself, and to fight back. It was learning how to resist, how to argue, and how to defend. So stabilizers are internal practitioners, okay? And they work for managers in change-resistant bureaucracies. Their job is to keep the peace. Say that again. Their job is to keep the peace. And sometimes what peace really means is silence. It's to conduct interventions that have the appearance of being and doing good, It is to do those phony consultations so that management can say that there was a consultation before they go ahead and do what they want. So that there's a process, so management can say that there was a process. It's not about whether it's an effective process. The cheerleader wants to keep everyone feeling good and prioritizes harmony. However, there isn't a focus on results. This is an agreeable conflict avoidance style that is not an effective form of change leadership, but they do try to keep people happy, and there's something to be said for that. The analyzer is your disagreeable, rational, results-oriented change leader who pisses people off. And this can work when what the practitioner wants to do is actually what needs to be done. And that is implied in the fact that what they're doing has been coded as effective. And they'll do that in a way that doesn't assume that the organization members need to develop the skills to solve their own problems. So it's not a coaching style. And this can work when you need someone to come in and get something done. Now, if the practitioner or the managers are wrong about what that is, then you have a problem. But it can be efficient. The persuader is a compromise position that balances morale and effectiveness to kind of get average results. And there's nothing wrong with average performance. The Pathfinder style is OD's ideal style, but I see that as a reification. And this style can only work in a certain kind of organization, and that's the one that reflects the OD values of individualism and humanism and employee engagement and confrontation. And as you know, those are not in fact the assumptions, values, or way of doing things in a typical bureaucracy. So the Pathfinder style focuses on 6 kind of processes. And those are communication, team dynamics, that looks at what the member roles are in groups, how people interact with each other, and also how the team gets things done. They look at culture and norms. They look at leadership and power, and they look at intergroup dynamics, which means how different groups or teams work together, the group-group relationship. And my question to you is, does this overlook anything important? I'll give you a minute to think about it.
There's no emphasis on results.
Oh, I wasn't thinking about that, but it's kind of true. Yeah. The Pathfinder style is supposed to have an emphasis on results. These are kind of the processes they focus on. What are the 5 subsystems? So just a minute.
Psychosocial.
So you have structural, you have psychosocial, goals and values. What else do you have?
Yes, that's a big one.
Managerial.
What was that one?
This is a hint. That's a hint. That's a hint. That's a hint. That's a hint.
Oh,
Technical.
yeah.
Okay. So, what are they focusing on?
It's all
Right.
people.
Sorry?
It's all people. It does not.
Yeah.
So you're covering that base. So you got that one. This is drying out. And this is where they file cultures. So you've got that. Got this.
Policies and everything. is-
Policies, positions.
I'm assuming they would probably.
It's kind of questionable.
Yeah.
Like maybe.
And technically not.
Let's see, that's then under how groups solve problems, because really all of this is how the group is solving a problem.
That is true.
A little bit of a stretch.
Yeah. It's not doing too well on that one.
Yeah.
Okay. So the axes they have here are effectiveness and morale. And I was considering that maybe you could also look at it as competence versus authoritarianism. So either you get the job done or you don't, right? Either you're effective, you get the results, and then there's who you please. So it's not true that your stabilizer is pleasing no one. Your stabilizer is a little bootlicker that's brown-nosing the powers that be. So to keep their job, the stabilizer has to be pleasing, has to produce morale, but just, with the most powerful people. And then this at the top would be trying to make everyone happy. And then I imagine that persuader might make certain groups happy and certain groups not happy. But who's who always matters in who you please. If you're going to be leading the change, ideally with the backing of management, you're going to need leadership skills. You're going to need skills of project management. That might mean something like knowing how to put together a Gantt chart. So you need to know what are the deliverables, who's involved, who does what by when, that kind of thing. You need good communication skills, so how to be clear but diplomatic. You need good skills in how to diagnose problems. Right? Often what somebody tells you is the problem isn't the real problem. Or there may be many different perspectives on that. How to frame a problem is an important skill. I think it was something that Shripad talked about. I think, if I recall correctly, he asked whether there was a problem to solve at all in that case. You need good interpersonal skills because you may need to negotiate conflicts or facilitate focus groups. And then they say you need personal skills. But what kind of skill can you have that isn't personal? They're your skills. The textbook emphasized the traits of confidence and openness. The change relationship consists of the organization as a system, which we know has these 5 subsystems. The internal practitioner is inside the system, and the external practitioner is, well, they're not completely out of the system, but they're a bit more independent. The change program is initiated by the client sponsor. That's your first contact in the organization. Maybe it's your boss, maybe it's management, whoever hired or commissioned you. And then there are the targets of the intervention. And in chapter 1, you learn that OD impacts the whole organization. That's a vision or an ideal. In practice, you're probably working on one particular unit or department or process. And ideally, that means the whole organization functions better. But usually looking at a target system, maybe more than one. Perceptions matter in OD because we engage in relationships and make decisions in ways that are based on our perceptions of reality, not reality itself, which nobody can see objectively. So our perceptions depend on what you know, what you see, on context, on your personal traits and histories and biases. And when we don't know something, when information is missing, we fill that information with our assumptions, which are naturally faulty. So you have to be ready to communicate a lot to uncover and address misunderstandings. Kind of like what we did with the class cancellation thing there. And they also make the point that, when you're coming into contact with the system, try to make a good first impression, because those tend to stick. So here are some common sore spots in the relationship between the client and the practitioner. The client may not know what the problem is, or be wrong about it. They may not be aware of the need for change. Well, they have some awareness of the need for change if you're talking to them. They may be insufficiently aware, or not aware of the right things. They may have unrealistic expectations. Often their expectations could be way too high. They may be misusing their power, which we'll talk about more. And then, as you know, there can be some pretty big value differences. So how are you going to navigate those? The strategy that you end up using to solve a problem in an organization can't only be based on your knowledge and values and the client's goals, right? There's going to be an interaction, there's going to be adjustments, there's going to be compromise. You're going to have to work with the culture, which is typically bureaucratic, and its readiness to change, which won't be all there with all stakeholders. You're going to need to develop trust. You can facilitate trust by communicating in skilled ways, by, say, asking questions, providing advice, reflecting on and interpreting what you hear, disclosing your own thoughts and feelings, or even just letting people sit with silence, because that gives them some space and time to figure themselves out or figure out the problem. People tend to tip towards doing certain things more than others, and so it's important to be aware of all these kinds of responses. So if you never use silence, you may just be rushing ahead and pushing things forward without giving people the time to let things sink in or to have answers to questions arise. I find if I ask a question in class, I need to wait like a good 10 seconds for anyone to say something. It was like, I just asked it and I was like, oh, okay, no, and then move on, nothing would happen. Some people might, let's say, lean towards advising and give a lot of advice, but then you're going to develop a kind of didactic style. You may develop a dependency relationship. So keep all these tools in your toolbox and use them all appropriately. There are 4 main relationship modes that, according to this model here, depend on one of the axes, personal responsibility, and on the other axis, basically trust. They say open to others, shares ideas and feelings. I'll call that trust. I do not like that personal responsibility piece. Accepts personal responsibility for own behavior. That sounds like a judgy parent. I've often seen personal responsibility narratives misused. Classically, the personal responsibility narrative is used to blame a victim of a systemic problem, gaslight the person, and then distract from systemic issues and management's responsibility to change the system. So just seeing that honestly makes me cringe. They make it all about the person, the individual, and so this model is blind to the influence of the system on the person, to the influence of power dynamics on the individual. And those are in fact forces that are so strong that they can just overwhelm individual will. So looking at this model through a lens of critical theory, looking at it with critical consciousness, then what could we see? If the organization isn't serious about change, you can't expect people to be anything more than cynical or apathetic. There's no incentive for them to be honest with you about their true feelings and ideas, because they've learned that it's not worth it. It'll come to nothing. In doing so, they might expose something or someone and somehow get in trouble for it. People in organizations have a lot of reasons outside of inability to accept personal responsibility for their own behavior to be cynical about change programs. A lot of OD interventions in organizations are about the optics and the politics of consultation and listening, not actual listening, consultation, or change. In an organization that's not serious about change, that doesn't really share OD values, you'll find that there are people who will take advantage of you for their own benefit. And usually they're the managers. It's the employees who are usually these cynical, apathetic ones. Sometimes people in the organization don't want change, but they can't say that they don't. And we saw that in the case with Shripad. Right? They wrote back that, yes, this is a great idea and we will comply. And then they didn't, because they didn't really like it. And sometimes people might really want change, but they're mid-level managers and they don't have the backing of higher level management, so there's not much that you can do. And then there are those that would use you. Let me draw your attention to the last paragraph of the chapter. In certain situations, there may be a conflict or an internal power struggle. In most bureaucracies, I mean, there's always conflict. There's always internal power struggle. Right? You have cliques of people who compete for power. You have, in a hierarchy, you have multiple people who will be jockeying to get the same position, because as you go up a hierarchy, there's fewer and fewer spaces, and most people want their careers in an organization to progress. So I think you pretty much depend on it that that's happening. And the client may wish to involve the practitioner as a weapon against other factions or individuals within the organization system. The person in the client system requesting external assistance may want others in the organization to change their ideas, it's like power, or may want to use the practitioner to enforce a position that's already determined. Something I see a lot of is the management knows exactly what it's going to do, but they need to have a consultation to look like they had a consultation to get buy-in. So they'll have a consultation, you'll be the facilitator running some focus group, you'll ask these great questions, people will give their feedback, you'll qualitatively analyze it and compare and put it into a report that just goes into somebody's draw. And then they do what they're going to do anyway, but they can say, well, there was a consultation. And the people who were part of that consultation never saw that report, so they don't know that they don't know what the results were. So when you submit your student evaluation feedback, like, would you know if one class gets an average of 1 out of 5? And that students hate these 10 things about it. You never see that. Who ever sees that? I don't see that. The resulting conflict would probably result in a destructive rather than constructive type of change effort, with the practitioner caught in the middle. Throwing the consultant under the bus when things go wrong, is a thing. If it all goes wrong, they need somebody to blame, and you're an external consultant, you're an ideal target. In other situations, the client may intend to use the practitioner only to gather information about others in the organization that would otherwise be unobtainable. So we can do some kind of a psychologically healthy workplaces survey that asks all kinds of questions, maybe about your mental health, maybe about sort of compromising information that you couldn't get otherwise. And so if you answer one of those surveys, you want to know whether it's anonymous. How do you know it's really anonymous? Because I see surveys here actually that you think are anonymous, but they're actually, if you go to your email, and they're tied to your student ID. And then you might want to know, what are the processes around privacy? Maybe there's a privacy policy. Well, do they actually follow that? How would you know? See the issues. When you go and do psychological research, like have you done research here?
I've just done surveys.
Okay, so
I've never conducted research.
Okay, so when you were participating in those surveys, you would have seen something called an informed consent form.
Yeah.
And then it goes over all that kind of stuff because that's required by the ethics committee. And if you ever do a survey, let's say if you do an honors program here, you will have to do an ethics application. But this kind of research doesn't come with an ethics application or an informed consent form.
Oh, a consultant doing research within the advocate,
Yeah. You don't have those checks and balances. So then there are those in an organization who are happy to go along with management's change program. And I actually don't see any reason to construct that as negative because they are rejecting personal responsibility. There are circumstances where this mode could be adaptive, just like that analyzer style could work. Maybe we could be more creative if everyone put forward their ideas, but that could also be inefficient and waste resources. So for this to work, the change leaders have to be right about the problem and the solution. And maybe sometimes they are. And if everyone's happy about that and goes along with it, that sounds good to me. I don't know why they call this mode charismatic, why they use that word. And it occurred to me that maybe management thinks that employees who are eager to please are charismatic people. And what also strikes me as reification, scholars of OD have idealized what they call the consensus mode, in which there's lots of caring, sharing, listening, confrontation. I don't consider that there is one best approach, and it was in chapter 1 that the textbook author suggested that contingency approach, saying that there's no one best way to manage, it depends on the context and the goals. So I see this as inconsistent. And one of my issues with the text, which I give it like a 3 stars out of 5, is that I do notice that there's inconsistency. As long as management is authentic about the desire to change, I don't think that there's one best relationship mode or practitioner style.
What does it mean to be authentic?
What does it mean to be authentic? So sometimes management doesn't really want to change, but they have to look like they're interested in change in order to get buy-in from some stakeholders, maybe from employees, maybe from customers. So there's an optics and politics of OD. You'll see a lot of that with EDIA stuff.
But even short of it being, about optics, even wanting to change,
Yeah.
I would question that as necessarily authentic, because wanting is something that can be manipulated by, well, not manipulated, influenced by your circumstances. Like wanting something doesn't necessarily mean that it is authentic.
Oh.
Or does it?
I
guess that's my question.
I mean that the desire for change is real, and it's not just a desire for the appearance of caring and the appearance of wanting equality.
Okay, but if I see an advertisement for something, for some way of being, I can desire that, but
Yes.
it came from an external source.
Oh, okay. So
is that authentic?
you're getting at
Is it authentic when I see an advertisement for an iPhone and it looks pretty and I want it because it's something that it's a shiny object that somebody made me want.
Yes, this is addressed by self-determination theory, which I actually don't like. I'm not a fan of self-determination theory, but it gets at this exact problem.
Okay.
And self-determination theory would be like, no, it must only come from your own true heart. But we are people that live in social context, and
that's not a thing.
yeah, that's why I'm a skeptic of SDT. But I would say that if you deeply desire a Lamborghini because you were taught to want that,
That is authentic.
yeah. Because you will work hard for it, you will drive it around showing off, it will influence your next action.
Okay.
But there are people that are involved in change programs that do not actually want to change.
And they know they do not want it.
I wonder if they lie to themselves.
It gets murky when you get into this area.
Because I've noticed that the people that do this kind of, I don't know, what strikes me as inauthentic virtue signaling might believe that they really are saviors.
Right.
They might be lying to themselves. I was thinking about this recently. So.
Well, I mean, people who have narcissistic tendencies often authentically believe that they are good and good at things and, above other people, and that is authentic.
Yeah.
But it is a totally inverted, blind spot.
Yeah, the reality, capacity to test reality isn't quite there.
Yeah, all right, yeah.
So I would say that they need to be authentic about actually doing the change. They would need to be okay with the idea that this may go in a direction that is not one you have chosen here and now and is not your highest hope. If you do something like employee consultations, things will come up that you didn't expect, and the direction will shift. You give up control.
That they need to be open to whatever direction it goes in order to be authentically on board with the change.
Yes, they have to be open to giving up control, because OD values power equalization.
Yeah.
But that's a lot to ask, because people like power. They like keeping it. They like maintaining the control. And when push comes to shove, they often don't really want to give it up. And, maybe with these consultations that I see, the managers are thinking, oh yeah, we'll do a consultation and we can learn all these interesting things. And then maybe they look at the results and they think, yeah, I'm going to do what I wanted anyway. They're not really willing to relinquish the control and to say, well, it looks like most people want to turn in this direction, and so I will, even though it's not what I think is best, or it's not what I would have wanted. There are a lot of tensions in doing OD. When your typical client is going to be a bureaucracy that is not doing very well, and it says somewhere in your textbook, which I think is sometimes very on point, that it's typically that those who most greatly need the change that are the most resistant to it. That's a good question. Practitioners should have some operating procedures that have been somehow written down. So an internal practitioner needs ground rules, kind of like the psychological contract activity that we did. An external practitioner needs a formal contract. And those should cover at least things like the purpose, like what are you doing? Your role, what are you going to do? So you know what is within your scope of responsibility and what's outside of it. To know what the fees are, what the schedule is, at least in an outline form, what the deliverables are, and then any other important sort of operational matters. What if you're overtime? What if somebody needs to cancel? So, are there any questions, comments? No? Okay, nothing on Zoom. For next class, please, oh, that should say chapter 5. For next class, please read chapter 5, which is, I'm trying to remember what that is. It's on how you diagnose the problem, I believe. And then you have another quiz due at the stroke of midnight on Sunday. Oh, I see I had chapter 5 there. I just forgot to delete the other bullet. And we are at 16 minutes past the hour, and we could end here. I could make myself available for any questions about the quizzes or the assignments. I know I ran a little overtime on the last 2 lectures, so this could make up for it.
I might later on.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll think about it.
Yeah, how is that going? Are you guys thinking about getting into groups?
I haven't touched it yet.
Yeah, so maybe,
So I think I like the description of it.
right.
Maybe just sort of an overview and get us thinking about that would be helpful.
The deadline that I put in the syllabus was really arbitrary, and it was because I didn't have anything else due on that particular Sunday, but I could see how that's not a desirable deadline in a lot of ways. There was a request when we did the psychological contract activity for kind of information on teams and teamwork. And I keep forgetting that this is dying. One good principle is to sort of play to your strengths. And so you're going to need people with a variety of different skills. And then, so you need to know what those are. I could say off the bat, if I were going into a team, I'm comfortable with presenting. Right? I have no problem being the one that stands up and gives the PowerPoint presentation if there was one. I haven't asked you for one, but what are the things you need to do? Well, I've given you a problem. The organization has this big problem, but with retention, but you need to do some research, right? So are you good at that? What else? You need somebody that can write in like a polished way. So if you want to produce something that you could give to a manager, it needs to look pretty good, be formatted, have something like an executive summary. Can't go on and on and on because they don't have that much time. You're going to have to coordinate your time. So you might need somebody that's a good coordinator, a good communicator to, get things started. Oh, I see a chat. I have a question, and you guys are all welcome to speak up. I wonder what is quiz 2 covering? That is in the syllabus. And it would be on, so none of the quizzes are cumulative. They all cover, it's a weekly quiz. So usually it's about 2 lectures. I have the lecture and the reading. But you'll see that in the syllabus. Thank you for the question. Communication, I'm trying to think of what other skills can be important. Another important thing with teams is to talk about limitations. Sometimes there's something that you're not good at, something you just don't want to do. You're welcome. So, what are you not good at? What are you not good at? Sometimes you have structural limitations. So last time I was in a class we were writing a paper, I said to the group when we had our first meeting that I have personal responsibilities. I cannot be working into the evenings or over the weekend. I can't leave things to the last minute. It can't be a binge for me. I need to start early and putting a small amount of time every day. And then we found things that I could do. So I was the first one to start, and I started with compiling notes from class. And I just put in, it was something like 2 hours every single day. And then the other teammate came on, and then the guy that was the last minute guy put in like 2 full days, sort of 12-hour stints to pull it all together. And it went very, very well. But that's not my working style. And my working style was not just like, no, with all the things I have going on, I can't get started. So that's kind of like structural, say, boundaries. Then, okay, so you need to know what your strengths are, and you need people in the team who can kind of cover all those bases. It's not all going to be you. You'll sort of specialize. And another important issue is the goal. In my intro set class with 100 students, I always like to ask students what their goal is for the class. Most of them, it's something like 70%, say that they want an A or an A+. There'll be a few of them who'd be happy with a B. There are vanishingly few that say, I want to get a C. And nobody ever says they want to get a D. And nobody ever says they want to fail or withdraw. But in reality, there are fewer people who get A's than want them, because many students want an A because they want an A, because an A is a socially desirable thing that will make you feel good about yourself because you associate your self-worth with your performances, which you really shouldn't do. But still, most students do that, and many students are not willing to put in the time or the effort or work to that level of quality. So you want to be honest about the goal for the team. And you know what? C's are satisfactory, C's get degrees, B's are good. And there are some students that want to get an A, that need to get an A, so they have funding that's depending on it, or they want to get into grad school. Or maybe they have a very highly conscientious or even perfectionistic character traits. So those students will not settle for less, and it can be very stressful for a student like that to be in a group where the other people don't really care, right? Where they have to pull the weight for them. Like that can be a very frustrating experience for that student.
That was my entire undergraduate degree.
That was. So it's good that you know that, and what that means is that you're gonna want to work with other students who are also like that. Okay, and so quiz 1 was the first quiz, and test taking is a skill. You guys have just encountered what my questions are like. I don't use the ones from the textbook because the answers are out online, so I can't use them, otherwise I would. But I anticipate that most of you will see an increase in your grade because you're figuring what my questions are like. Yeah, what my style is. And you're also you're also practicing and improving your own test-taking skills. So maybe you've learned that it's more worth your time to do something and not something else. But maybe you've probably learned that it's probably worth looking at the PowerPoint decks. Okay? So I anticipate that for those of you that want to get high grades, your grades will increase. For right now, in a class with an enrollment of 12, I'm seeing about 4 students that look like they're definitely going to get an A at this point. Right, in terms of final grade. So
Based on one quiz?
And that's why I'm qualifying it and saying that this is based on one quiz, because the numbers I expect will increase from quiz 2 to quiz 3. But what I'm saying is that you're in a class of 12 where some people are not currently conducting themselves or preparing themselves in a way that looks like any student would. So what I'm trying to say is you need to know what your goal is. So some of you will not settle for less than an A, and you need to be clear with your teammates about that. And if you're somebody that really wants to put in a C or D level of effort, then be honest and open about that too. I don't judge anyone for that. I think C's are just fine. You want to be open and honest with your teammates about what your goal is and how much effort you're willing to put in. Am I dropping the first quiz grade? That is something that, had I decided to do, that's something that you would find in the syllabus. That is information that you will find in the syllabus. The answer is no, though. So you have 10 quizzes. I think that's a lot of quizzes to pull up your grade if you're looking to do that. Maybe the first grade is the worst grade, but each quiz is worth 6.5%. And if somebody totally missed a quiz and didn't submit the extenuating circumstances for, then you'd lose 6.5% on your final grade. But let's say you pulled a 50, well then you lost 3.25 and you're still in the A+ range if you wanted to get 100 on everything else. And you need to make sure that you pass the quizzes with a 50% average. This is also in the syllabus. And that is because I give people a lot of participation points, and my grading tends to be lenient, and I don't want people to get throughout the class just on kind of class participation. So that's why the quizzes are, I'd say, a bit more challenging, and why I have that 50% criterion. When I first started teaching, I had the 50% criterion. I did that a couple times. It seemed to work well, and then I took it off, and then I saw that, oh, somebody got through that really shouldn't have had. I think I have pretty good design, and I only got through with a D, but still I decided that I needed to put it back. So I do have that requirement. If you want to talk about, so take a look at the grading key once I have, well, we can, it's already released, and you guys are welcome to meet with me or email me to discuss that. And I have a comment here, let me just read it. The questions really threw me off. The questions were 3 and 4 sentences long and does not take 1 minute to read and understand and answer, but I was just asking. Okay, you can email me and we can have a meeting. Any other questions? You look like you have thoughts. I can hear you thinking.
No, just Brian.
You're assuming that.
Yeah, exactly.
I was.
Based on behavioral cues.
It's really hard with the masks because, like, let's say that you.
No, you're correct.
Yeah, you can frown, and when I see like you frown a lot, and sometimes I think I've offended him and he's mad at me because I don't know like what the rest of your expression is. Okay, yeah, so you kind of want to be clear and honest about your individual goals, about your personal goals, and then what you're willing to do for it, right? A lot of people want A's and are not willing to put in the effort. And then you kind of get an overall sense of, say, your team goal. Something I could do is start a discussion forum on Brightspace where you could maybe advertise for group members or seek each other out, because I realize that since this is an in-person class, but most people are now following along hybrid or remote, so you're not meeting each other.
I was thinking it's going to be very difficult to create teams because other than Mark, I don't know anybody else in the class. No idea.
Yeah.
It would just be a name. So
Yeah.
playing to when you have it playing to your strengths. I don't know what my strengths are, but I have no idea if anybody else's.
Okay.
There really is no. I've been the only one in the class once, and then other than that, it's just been the two of us here for the most part. I don't even know who the other people are.
Yeah. I didn't consider that.
Not to fault you in any way for that. That's just my experience of the situation.
Well, I hadn't thought about that. So when I made the 3-way participation, I didn't think about how you would be able to meet each other and get to know each other. So you see, it's like cool change program, digital learning, yay, and this issue came up that I did not foresee.
It's a little fragmented. It's a little. Anyway.
So how are we going to work around this? You guys could send me this information, and then I could try to match you with.
What do you think is appropriate?
It's not bad. I like that idea. Yeah.
So if people like that idea, they could do it, and then you could just ask me to randomly assign you.
I would be happy with that.
Happy with which one? You want the random assignment or the?
Oh, the tell a little bit about your strengths.
Yeah.
And put some teams together.
Okay.
That'd be an interesting experience actually to have somebody who has kind of more certainly academic experience with team arrangement, because that's the field of study in a way. How that would be as a group member.
Yeah. Okay. And I had a question. Can you just put us in groups? And so I know that Dana is. So the students on.
There's more wordy.
The students who are following on Zoom right now are not able to hear the conversation I'm having with you. So yes, I just had that conversation. And so basically, I'll do this at the individual level. So if you just want me to stick somewhere, I will do that. And if you want me to be a bit more of a matchmaker, I'm happy to do that too. When I last taught this course 2 years ago, I assigned the groups, and I did it by grade. So people were assigned to A teams A, B, and C. And what I had done was I put all the A students in team A because I knew they'd be really upset if they weren't, working with people that had the same values. And that was my fear. That's why I did it. And then I put the C and D students in team C, and I put the team B was tough because there were students who were like getting solid Bs, and they were clearly team B. And then there were these students that had like alphabet soup grades. And I was like, well, that averages to a B, so team B. And what ended up happening was that team A just like did a great job. They loved their group. They, at one point, because people had sometimes, people drop the course and you get uneven numbers, I had wanted to shuffle things around, and I emailed them to say, oh, would you mind? Or like, no, we like our group. And they did great, so they got like A+ on everything. And team C was kind of as you might expect, like it was a C level of work. And I recall, someone sort of complaining to me that it was hard to get people together to meet, like they were kind of leaving us to the last minute. But they did fine. And then all the issues, and there were really serious issues, were in Team B. Can you guess what happened? There's two kinds of students in Team B. The solid Bs and the alphabet soup grades.
What's the profile of the alphabet soup grade person?
So that class ended up having serious issues with academic integrity. And ended up sending 7 people to the formal process, and 6 of them were found. There's a finding, and they found that there had been academic misconduct in all but one case. And I'm sorry to that poor traumatized student I put through that process that didn't actually cheat, but they were the people that were cheating.
On part of the solid Bs or the alphabet soup grade?
The solid Bs were solid. But so what happened was that so when I put the students, I didn't know that they had been cheating. The cheating students together, they got extra cheaty. They're like, we found the answers and let's share them. And then they kind of managed to try to draw in the other students, the solid Bs. And one of them kind of slipped and went along with it. He ended up with a slap on the wrist in the academic integrity process. He was honest about it. Like he was up front. He said, I did this. He was upfront about it. Often in the academic integrity processes, the students that cheat will lie about it. And they will lie in an insistent way, and they'll get an advocate from the student union. And the guy who was running the academic integrity process had kind of already dealt with these students before, and kind of figured they were cheating. But they swear up and down that they absolutely don't cheat. And so they had gotten one of the other solid Bs in a little trouble, but he came through fine. Like he sort of found his integrity. He said, I did that. And he told, it was Mark who was running the process, exactly what he had done. So then he knew how the cheating was happening. And then the other one had just been like, no, and stuck to her guns and sort of didn't cheat even though she had the opportunity to do so. And she ended up getting a B in the class, even though she had been hoping for an A and given her a lot of support. And I remember when I signed the final grade, I wrote an email, I said, B is for brave and beautiful. That's correct. So, that was my experience from last time. So yes, if you guys want to let me know what your preferences are, and then I can start putting those groups together. I'm thinking 3 to 4 people tops per group. Right now, the enrollment is 12, but if somebody misses a quiz, it might mean that they're going to drop the course. So let's say 1 or 2 people drop the course, and then we can be down to 10. So maybe that's something like 3 groups of 3, maybe 1 group of 4.
Is a team of 2 fine?
No, I think that's too few.
Because we could be a team and then you could
Yeah.
turn around and work with somebody with us. I was gonna
Yeah.
say,
This was inevitable.
Yeah.
It's just easier because we've been here.
Yeah.
We know each other, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so we'll start thinking about this. And then another thing that I need to do that I haven't done yet, that's on my plate, is a rubric for grading the assignment. And this is your opportunity for student engagement and me giving up control.
Everybody gets an A.
So one of the things that I would want the TA to grade on is kind of the polished presentation. I don't know if you call that format, but it shouldn't look like a sloppy student paper. Should format be 100% of the grade, or? I wouldn't give it more than 10%, I don't think. I'm just putting these, I'm thinking about these right now. Or sketching. This is like me working on a napkin at a restaurant. But it's your opportunity to contribute.
It's still the ballpark.
Yes, so format I know is something. You,
Like readable and coherent, it should.
yes.
You know,
Yeah.
So like communication.
Yeah, let's call that communication. Is that what we want to call it? Something. But we know what we're getting at. So you're going to be reviewing this OB intervention. I'm going to see if the plan was for Lisa to come into class and deliver the intervention so that you can see it live. I taped it when she gave it in my intro psych class, and I put that in the syllabus. So you can watch the tape from this, I don't know, from that class. That's right in the syllabus. You can just go and click the link and see it. I anticipate that if she gave it in this class, it might change a little from that. But it could be good practice. You might watch it and get some questions. Lisa's currently off work, so I'm not sure if it will be her or if it'll be Gail. If it does end up getting canceled outright because that unit has a lot on its hands, then I would just base it on the video, and we can use that class time to talk about things. Oh, I saw a question. I don't know if I read this out before, but will I be posting a practice quiz for quiz 2? That is definitely the plan. I had an arrangement to meet with Ian on Friday to set up practice quizzes, but it's a holiday, but I'm planning to meet them on Monday. So, you know what? I can figure out how to do a practice quiz by myself so that you have one for quiz 2, and then I can take myself doing it and then send Ian the tape so he knows how to do it for the other quiz. So I'm going to say, yes, I'll give you a practice quiz for quiz 2. Practice quizzes, in my experiences, do help with grades. However, the practice quizzes are from the textbook, and they don't cover anything that I might have in the lecture that's not in the book. But I think it's still a good study tool. So I will do that. So there's some things that I don't have these are right on my arm. So practice quiz, and then I need to email you guys about your kind of team preferences. Okay, I've got that written on my arm now. What else would we grade on? So you're gonna review that intervention, and I want to know kind of what's good about it. So you provide some affirmative feedback. You know, what worked about it? And then saying great job, I loved it is not good quality feedback. Right? I've been talking about these myths of positivity and negativity, and people believe there's positive feedback and negative feedback, and they should only ever get positive feedback, and that is dysfunctional. Because in reality, feedback can be affirmative or positive in the adaptive sense that says, yes, you were moving towards the worthy goal. And then it can, there's a dimension for quality. So, great job is not good quality affirmative feedback or positive feedback because it doesn't tell you why it's a great job. It doesn't tell you anything. Right?
It just means big, large.
Yeah. I once when I read my student evaluations, somebody said, "You suck." And that was all that was there. You suck. And I was like, what do I suck? Why do I suck? Who do I suck?
In your evaluation?
When do I suck? Yeah, just said you
Oh
suck.
my God.
That's one of the reasons why people don't open them. Because they're just, the students aren't given any training and feedback and how you give good feedback. And so, do you really want to open an envelope that is probably going to contain abuse? And that's one reason why people don't read them. You're welcome. I will certainly, yes, I'll get the practice quizzes up as soon as I can. Okay, so then quality affirmative or quality positive or quality negative feedback using an adaptivist lens is, well, the negative stuff is going to be constructive. It's going to tell you how you could do better. Right? It's going to be, and they're both going to be clear. They're going to be specific.
Like stop, start, continue.
Yeah, they're going to, yeah.
That's
Stop, start, and continue. So that's like stop or start.
Stop doing these
And-
behaviors.
And
start
this is
doing
your,
these behaviors,
and this is your continue. I love that. I love that stuff. That's
I
great.
can't claim, I didn't create that.
I like it though.
We
And-
hired a consultant actually, my business hired an HR consultant, and that was
Yeah.
the structure she used for feedback.
I like it. And it needs to always be clear and specific and contextualized. Right? And I guess fair. Right? It should not be, it shouldn't be abusive. Shouldn't be vague. Shouldn't be decontextualized, and which I will call reified.
Well, you suck would be excellent positive feedback for a vacuum cleaner.
Yes, you suck is excellent feedback for a vacuum cleaner. I like that. Good point.
Context.
So affirmative feedback and then constructive feedback. There are going to be a lot of limitations to this intervention. Like, so you have this staggering retention problem. You're losing 55% of your students. And what's the ability of this to address that problem? What do you expect in terms of effect size? Like how much impact can you have? Right? You know that that power matters. So this intervention comes from career and experiential learning, the career development professionals there, the career counselors, the career coaches. What kind of employee are they? Remember we talked about the different kinds of employees?
Oh. Which department are they from? Are they
Career and experiential learning. They're staff.
Yes.
So what power does staff have over faculty? Yeah, so power matters. So how much power does staff have? And then what's the incentive for faculty to actually say yes and run this intervention in their classrooms? It's going to cause a little disruption. You have to make room for your syllabus. So if the intervention is to come in to a classroom like this, you need to get permission from the faculty member. why would the faculty member say yes, even if it worked? You saw my contract.
Yeah, a lot of them won't.
Yeah,
Some of them would be.
some of them, yeah.
People who
And-
want to please their employer.
So people who, let's say, so people who want to please,
Agreeable people will.
maybe agreeable. So maybe some people would say yes, and maybe there's something about those people. Let's say they're people who are really student success oriented. Well, did they have problems to begin with? So these are all things you can think about and kind of, show me that you've been reading the textbook and listening and learned things. You should be able to apply what you've learned to this.
I was just going to say that as a bullet point, application of textbook.
Yes, that should be in, application of learning. You should be able to demonstrate that.
Application of textbook concepts, pardon me.
Yeah, it could be from the textbook, it could be from lectures, it could be things you read when you researched.
Course concepts.
Yes, and I haven't had a lecture on student retention. I've dropped things, right? I've found opportunities to sort of mention things that might be relevant. I've dropped some hints, but I haven't really done much more than that. So application of learning for your research. So that also means I should be seeing that there's been some research on student retention problems. Otherwise, you were just assuming that this career development intervention is going to impact retention, and why would you think that? Is there any evidence out there that suggests that career development students, connecting them maybe to meaning or purpose or making them feel more employable, actually does make them stay?
I'm sure there's research on it.
I'm sure there is. And then another thing that I want to know is how would you evaluate it? Right? How would you know if this works? Do you want any thoughts? Like how could you, if there's a workshop intervention and your outcome is retention?
Well, that's already, the retention rate's already been measured by enrollment and continued,
You have to get that.
data on continued enrollment.
So that's sort of, we lose 55% of our students. That's after 6 years. But are you going to propose a 6-year evaluation study? So what are decent short-term measures of retention?
Would semester over semester registration be?
Sounds good to me, but you might want to look at the research, right? You can't use that measure. And then how would you know if the intervention improved that?
Control group. So you need,
So that sounds like some kind of experimental design that you'd be proposing. So what would the control group be doing?
status quo.
That's one type of control group. There are different ways to do that. So there's waitlist controls, or you could have them, compared to status quo. You could just cancel the class so it's compared to no intervention, right? There are different options. So those are things to think about. We are now at, I went a little over time at 6:51 p.m., but are there any other thoughts or questions? No? Good. Okay. Thank you. And reach out to me by email if there's anything. And I will be emailing you guys shortly with these tasks on there. So take care and thank you for your engagement.